Good afternoon, everybody. Saturday afternoon here in North London and other parts of Great Britain, of course. Just another update on my post of the Sudan Wars, particularly the Gordon Relief Expedition of 1884 to save Gordon at Khartoum. I've managed to do about a dozen or so Dervish troops, and some of them are the famous Fuzzy Wuzzies, and with the very bushy hair and very dark figures. The others are more like just regular Dervish troops, if I can put it that way, with the patched jibbas or uniforms of the Mahdists. As a sign of piety, they took to putting patches on their clothing. It started out as a necessity, and then it became of deep religious significance. And I was able to lay down a fairly good colour. I'm afraid it's not picking it up very well on this camera. Apologies for that. It's not as clear as I would like it to be, but essentially what you see there, as I say, is about a dozen dervishes. In the back row I ended up with 4 odd figures. I don't know whether they were sent complimentary with Newlyn miniatures, because I've placed a fairly sizable order, or whether I just misordered, but I ended up with 2 buglers, an NCO and an officer. And as I'd been in the post office myself, I had a particular interest in a unit called the Post Office Rifles, who in 1884-85 volunteered ordinary postmen, straight from the depots in England, volunteered for service in the Sudan, and a unit was actually put together in order to man the heliograph, the signalling services, and did good work out there, and was given the battle honour for 1884-85 Khartoum. And their uniform, by all accounts, appears to have been the postman's delivery uniform of the time, which was grey trousers and a dark blue jacket with green facings. So they literally just packed up their postman's delivery uniform, and with the addition of some black leather equipment, they were good to go. And as I say, did very good service out there, and given a battle honour. So I'm sure this is not picking up too well. I filming during the middle of the afternoon, and the sun's streaming in, but I don't seem to be getting a very good pick up on this. Well, it's a mobile phone camera. I see some of you have lovely quality in terms of colour and clarity, but nevertheless, this will give you some idea of where I am. The other thing that I wanted to show you was 2 books which I picked up. One I mentioned before, which was the First Jihad, which was essentially a retelling of the siege of Khartoum, and the Gordon Relief Expedition. Now this is written by an American, Daniel Allen Butler, and it's a very good account. I've only read a short way into it, but I've flicked through it. I've got a tendency to go through and sometimes look at the last page. I know it's not a great idea. I wouldn't do it with a whodunit, but I tend to flick through and have a look, and you've got the usual pictures of the Marty and Gordon, and the interesting thing is the book actually takes the story up until essentially September the 11th, 2001, at the time of the attack on the Twin Towers, and the author obviously draws the inevitable conclusions of the September 11th attack being essentially a continuation of the fight between militant Islam and the West. And it's a good, you're always looking for a bit of variety. I mean, you can buy countless books on the Khartoum situation and siege, but they all essentially say the same things. Not a bad book at all. The other one was a bit of a curiosity. I picked up a reprint from the collections of the University of California libraries. And this is letters from Khartoum written during the siege by the late Frank Power. It does say that this would be the original print from 1885, just within a year of the events it describes having taken place. And it does say it's kind of warts and all in terms of on certain pages you've got annotations and things underlined and marked, presumably some years ago, and everything's picked up. It's literally reprinted entirely as it came out. A little tick on that page and a little mark on the other page. So they've copied it page for page, and they do advise you of such. For those of you who don't recall, you may have seen the film Khartoum with Charlton Heston as General Gordon and Laurence Olivier as the Marty. And Frank Power was the Times correspondent and unofficial consul for Great Britain in Khartoum at the time of the siege. During the film, some months before the fall of the city, General Gordon sent a number of Sudanese and Egyptians, I believe prominent people who wished to leave, along with correspondents and consuls, and his essentially aide-de-camp, Colonel J.D.H. Stewart, played in the film by Richard Johnson, down the river with what was at that time the only available route out of the besieged city, on one of the gunboats that General Gordon, I believe he had 2 gunboats, for sending messages down the Nile. And when the siege was virtually complete, the only way conceivably out was down the Nile, and he sent his friend and ADC J.D.H. Stewart down the Nile with messages ultimately for the government and other Western leaders, stating their position and that he couldn't leave without withdrawing the garrison, and he was unable to do that, so they required the lifting of the siege. He also sent down, as I say, all the correspondence, and in the film, some of you may remember the completely made up scene where Gordon and the Marty meet. They never actually met historically, but it fitted in well with the film to have them kind of talk to each other and put their respective points of view and their beliefs to each other. And when Gordon went to see the Marty in the film Khartoum, the Marty, as I say, played by Laurence Olivier, realised that Gordon wasn't aware that he was fully alone, and that the gunboat that it sent down the river with all these people from Khartoum and the consuls and his aide-de-camp had actually been involved in a collision on the Nile on the way down, and the ship was unable to proceed, or the boat was unable to proceed, and they were invited ashore to take some refreshment prior to getting some camels to take them onward with their journey. Of course, they never made it. The person, the local emir who had actually invited them to come ashore, had actually gone over to the Marty, and so he had some of his men fall upon the party during some refreshments, and they were all killed. and all their correspondence and reports from Gordon about the state of the siege were seized. And in the film, the Marty realises that Gordon has no knowledge of this, and he takes him over to a kind of little, like 3 sort of buckets on a sideboard, basically, and uncovers one, and it's he lifts out two heads, which are of Frank Power, the Times correspondent and late consul for Great Britain, and also I believe the French consul. He then goes on to remove from another bucket or container the hand of Colonel J.D.H. Stewart, and upon this, one of the fingers of this hand is a ring which Gordon gave the colonel before he departed Khartoum. So at that point he was able to be aware that they were quite alone and no messages had got through, and worse, perhaps all the messages he had sent had been seen and read by the Mahdi. Anyway, this book is of its time, published in 1885. It's bits and pieces, really. There are letters to friends, family members, loved ones back in England. There are also reports in his capacity as consul, and it's very day-to-day kind of minutiae. We're used to reading about the big picture, the siege of Khartoum, General Gordon on the roof of the palace, and all of these things are on the grand scale. This is very much the sort of day-to-day conversations, and his first meetings with Gordon, when Gordon arrived in the city, and also his first impressions of General Gordon. I'll just read a very brief passage here, which gives you some idea of the kind of intimacy of the writing. Gordon is a most lovable character, quiet, mild, gentle and strong. He is so humble too. The way he pats you on the shoulder when he says, "Look here, dear fellow, now what do you advise?" would make you love him. When he goes out of doors, there are always crowds of Arab men and women at the gate to kiss his feet, and twice today the furious women, wishing to lift his feet to kiss them, threw him over. He appears to like me and already calls me Frank. He likes my going so much amongst the natives, for not to do so is a mortal sin in his eyes. I often speak of you to General Gordon. He says he must make your acquaintance before we go to the Congo. He would like a day in Dublin. He is dictator here. The Mahdi has gone down before him and today sent him a salam, or message of welcome. It is wonderful that one man could have such an influence on 200,000 people. Numbers of women flock here every day to ask him to touch their children to cure them. They call him the father and saviour of the Sudan. He has found me badly up in Thomas à Kempis, which he reads every day, and has given me an imitation of Christ. He is indeed, I believe, the greatest and best man of this century. He asks me who I am writing to, and when I say to you, he says he hopes you will someday give him a cup of tea and like him. No one could help it. I stay on here to the end. I'll stop while he stays. Now, given that we know what happened and that everybody lost their life, it's very, very poignant now to read this, but at the time, it's, as I say, very, very intimate, very matter of fact, and done in such a way that you clearly understand that they appreciate the seriousness of their situation, but, I suppose like everyone, they don't think the worst is really actually going to happen. I enjoyed the book immensely, got it off of Amazon, about £6 or £7. These are the figures again. Again, I don't think they're picking up too well. I've placed them in these trays. They're not actually complete yet, the trays, but there you go. That's the Post Office Rifles Heliograph Core. Just a few odds and sods spares that I actually painted up. and yeah, they're coming out. They've got a bit of Agrex Earth shade over them. May thin that down a bit more next time, but they look suitably sort of campaign worn, and for the Dervishes, reasonably pleased with the outturn of them. The shields are separate. Made the mistake of actually putting the shields on first. I wanted a good bond before I undercoated them and everything, but I may leave the shields off until the last next time. And that's as far as I've got. I've got the next one's already lined up. I've got some more some more unpainted casting, which I'm about to do, and then I've got about another 25 infantry and a combination of 30 or 40 camels and horses of the Dervishes. They seem to be going along quite well, and I seem to be making good progress. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed this update. Apologies again for the poor quality of the filming. I managed to get a tripod, but what I seriously clearly need is a decent camera. But I hope this has been of some amusement value, and I shall keep you updated and look forward to your own posts. Thank you very much.